Academy for the Blind. Taco. They served ice cream and maybe a sandwich or something.
Yeah.
And then they had a gravel parking lot. And the guys that used to work at the Pig and the Varsity, a lot of them went out there and worked.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we used to go out there all the time.
Small world,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what's something.
Tell me your name.
Marcus Gandy.
And tell me what, and I'm getting this just for this, then I'm going to sit here and you can look at me there, and this will keep rolling. What year were you born?
1936.
1936. Okay, that gives me something to work with later when we're doing a bunch editing. Now you can just look at me and let that thing do its job.
Okay.
Tell me about your family in Macon, the history, just a little bit of the history.
We moved to Macon in 1937, February, March of 37. We came from Meigs and Pelham, Georgia. That's where all my family's from. And my daddy and his older brother, Roy Gandy, wanted to go into the pool room business because that's all my daddy's brother had ever done since he graduated from high school. And we moved to Macon, and they opened up a billiard academy, the Macon Billiard Academy, right next door to the Rich Theater on Cherry Street across from the Davisons. It was a 3-story building. And the first 2 floors were pool tables. The 3rd floor was a bowling alley. And all of our pool tables were Brunswick tables, because Brunswick was the manufacturer of pool tables. And then we opened up the New Arcade on Mulberry Street about 4 or 5 years later. And then a few years later, we opened up a pool room in Augusta, Georgia. And my family, we moved to Augusta and operated that one. And then we sold it, and we moved back to Macon and operated the 2 pool rooms. And then in 1955, my daddy sold his interest in the pool tables, and we moved to Daytona for about 6-7 months. And my dad was manager of one of the large country clubs down there. And that's how we got involved in the restaurant business, because we moved back to Macon January the 1st, 1956.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what inspired you to get in the restaurant business?
The golf course, country club in Daytona. My daddy was general manager of the golf and country club, Eleanor Village Golf and Country Club. It was one of the largest around Daytona at the time. And they had a large resort area connected with it. And when we moved back to Macon, my dad went into business with a gentleman that they opened up a meat company. And they sold meat to restaurants and businesses, schools in Macon. And Mr. Joyner, Hubert Joyner, and his son Bobby and I used to deliver the meat for them to the schools. They had a station wagon, and we would deliver the meat. And they kept that for about 1.5 years, and then they split up. Mr. Joyner went to be the head manager of the Swift Meat Company, which used to be in Macon. And we opened up the Saratoga, February the 5th, 1957, on my dad's birthday. It was the day we opened the door. And when we opened it, before we opened it, it was just a juke joint where people went in there to drink beer and eat a hot dog or something. They had a huge jar on the counter of weenies, the old kind, and pickles, stuff on these big jars. And going up in our upstairs, in our office upstairs at Saratoga, it was against the law to serve liquor at the time. And they had a fake wall. The whole wall would lift out. And you could attach it to the ceiling, and behind that wall was shelves, just bukus of shelves, where they lined the liquor up. And going up to the office upstairs, if you didn't want to have to go up there on a quick run, you could kick one of the steps going up, and it would lift up, and you could put your bottles of liquor down in the step. But it was against the law to have liquor in Macon at that time.
Remind people where the Saratoga was.
It was in the alley behind the Dempsey Hotel, right off of Cherry Street.
And today, I think we have Tokyo Alley. We have the steakhouse that's down there now. That used to be I think the Saratoga.
It's called the
Downtown
Grill now.
Grill.
Richie Jones owns it now.
Right, and then there's something about the back of that restaurant. You could go out the back of that restaurant.
Back in the back, you could go upstairs. There was a huge room that went all the way to Cherry Street. Nothing but a storage room up there. And I think there was a shoe shop on the Cherry side. And Mr. Sanders Walker, Pickton Walker, owned that building. And we leased or rented the building, the Saratoga building, from Mr. Walker.
How long was the Saratoga there in that spot?
We opened it up February the 5th, 1957, and we sold it about 1974.
About 1974.
Mm-hmm. My dad wanted to retire, and my brother wanted to move to Florida, and he opened up a restaurant in Florida.
That's all the pictures on Facebook you see of Greg Allman and Cher and a bunch of other people eating at the Saratoga.
Okay. Yeah, I was telling him before you came, Zelda Redding used to work for us.
Mm-hmm.
Otis's wife at the Saratoga. She used to work for us back, I guess, in the 60s. And Otis used to come by all the time to see her. So,
well, it wasn't just the Saratoga that you got involved with. What's one of the other restaurants?
With Mark's Cellar. We opened up about 1960 or 61. It was in the basement of the Lanier Hotel, which was owned by Emmett Barnes, Charlie at the Lanier Corporation. And at the time, there was nothing. You couldn't even stand up in the basement. We had to cut a hole in the sidewalk on Mulberry Street and drop a small bulldozer down in there to dig the dirt out so that we could build the restaurant and the Cave Lounge.
What inspired the idea of the cave itself?
We lived in Kentucky back when my dad was in World War II in about 1943 or 1944. And my daddy had a weekend off, and he wanted to take us on a trip to the Mammoth Cave. And we toured the cave on an all-day trip. And we were so interested in the way the Mammoth Cave was, when we decided to build the lounge, we decided to name it the Cave, after the Mammoth Cave.
Now, you had the old Lanier Hotel, and now you got the Fickling building. Now I think they backed up to each other.
They butted up to each other.
And then they tore down the old Lanier Hotel and made a parking garage.
After we closed up, it wasn't a parking garage, it was an asphalt parking lot at the time.
But you were underneath.
Not then.
No.
We'd already left. We sold it in 1975.
In 75.
75. Mr. Tom Standard bought the hotel from the Lanier Corporation. They went over and bought the American Federal Building right across the street. And they moved Charlie Adams, Emmett Barnes, Hank O'Neill, their law firm. There were 5 of them. They were in the Lanier Hotel. And it was also, it had a club in there, the American Legion or AMVETS or something, had a club and also in the Lanier Hotel. Plus you could rent rooms by the week, month, year, whatever. And it started to decline when Emmett Barnes, not Emmett, but Hank O'Neill and them moved the law firm, and then the club closed up, and people were not renting the rooms. And so Mr. Tom Standard, who owned it at that time, said, I'm going to tear the building down, but I'm going to build a building back comparable. It was the Georgia Power Building next door at the time, called the Georgia Power Building. We're going to tear this Lanier Hotel down, but I'm going to build back a building comparable, not as big as the Georgia Power Building, which is the Fickling building now. It won't be as big, but it will be comparable. And we're going to build a building, and we're going to retain a restaurant in the basement if y'all want to be there. And we decided not to because my dad was going to retire and my brother was going to move to Florida. So he just tore it down and built an asphalt parking lot.
So Mammoth Caves in Kentucky inspires
the Cave Lounge.
The Cave Lounge. What inspired the idea behind the Cave Lounge itself? Because beyond the cave, you had jazz music, you had jazz bands.
There was no place in Macon that you could really go and dance. There was no place in Macon. The only place I can think of was, this is back 40s, 50s, 60s, when the Barnes owned the Pine Brook Inn.
Yeah,
way out before you get to Wesleyan College. In fact, Janine's restaurant is in the location where the Pine Brook Inn used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that was dancing out there at that time. But there was really no place downtown that you could go dancing. And we wanted a nice place, not just a club, but we had a nice place. And we required people to dress. Men had to wear a coat and tie to come in.
Mm-hmm.
You could go in the restaurant dressed in casual attire, not shorts and blue jeans, but casual sports shirt, stuff like that. But to go into the cave lounge, we wanted to keep it really, I'll use the word dignified. Not any class of people, anybody was welcome. Anybody. And we had people in the restaurants and in the cave, because there was no other place around Macon that you could go to at that time and get a nice steak, like at the Saratoga. We had Danish lobster tails, which are the little small lobster tails, mm-hmm. like your Brazilian or African lobster tails. We had finest steaks. We had our steaks, meat shipped in from out west, and it was stored at Swift & Company. And Mr. Joyner, who we used to be in business with in the meat business, was the head chef, and he would personally cut our steaks for us, what we wanted. We had fillets, club steaks, Delmonico's, strip steaks, T-bones. At the time, just to give you the idea, there wasn't a place within 60 miles of Macon, other than Atlanta, probably to Savannah or somewhere like Jacksonville. You could go and get a nice steak, take your wife or your date, and sit down without fighting your way in and fighting your way out. It was a nice place to go. And our filet mignon, bacon wrap, 6-ounce filet with tossed salad, French fries, or baked potato was $1.95.
Wow.
That's amazing.
With $1.95, you could get all that. Now you go, you pay $20-some just for the filet, like at some of the restaurants in Macon now, the big name restaurants, places. And I don't know about the other steaks, but we were very well priced. We had our famous hamburger called Charcoal Burger. And you got lettuce, tomato, and French fries, and pickles with that for 50 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And at night, like I say, people would come from 50, 60 miles around because Warner Robins, Milledgeville, Forsyth, Jackson, Griffin, there was no place to eat. You could only go to Atlanta to get a nice steak and eat in a nice restaurant. And so people would come from that far around. And during the week, it was mainly our traveling people that we participated with that would come to patronize us. Then on weekends, it would be the local people that would come Fridays and Saturdays. We were closed all day on Sunday. We wouldn't open on Sunday. We wanted people to be home with their families. And we opened at about 11:30 in the daytime. And we closed at 3. We took a 2.5-hour break from 3 to about 5:30. Then we opened back up about 5:30 to serve meals. And we served meals till 11 o'clock at night at both of our restaurants, the Saratoga and the Cellar. The difference in the Cellar and the Saratoga mainly was at the Cellar, we served flaming shish kebabs where the meat would come out on a big platter and it would be a flaming glow coming off of it. And we had our own lobster tank. And we had live Maine lobsters flown in from Maine twice a week out to the airport. And a lot of times the Delta employees, which I knew out there, they would call us late that afternoon, and they'd say, your lobsters just came in. We'll deliver them to you after we close. And so the people that worked at Delta at the airport would bring us our big box of lobsters, and we would clean them up and put them in the lobster tank. And other than that, the steaks were all the same, basically as the Saratoga too.
But, at the same time, you had great food. You had a unique location, something that modern-day restaurateurs do not design anymore. They build all their buildings that look the same. Everything looks the same, smells the same, has the same menu, and gives it 1,000 different names.
Yes.
And I don't frequent those places whatsoever. The way that you were doing things, in addition, you had the food, but you had the entertainment.
Yes.
How was that taken in Macon during that time?
It was received pretty good, being there was no other place you could go unless they had a special dance, like at the City Auditorium, because there was no civic center at that time, just the auditorium. And your private clubs, of course, would have dances there. But a lot of our patrons were people from the private clubs that would come down to eat.
With the Cave Lounge, which was separate than the Cellar?
It was in the same building but separate. We had it built, the walls were actually built like in the Mammoth Cave. They were huge stones we got out of a grist mill that was out in the country, out of Macon. And to get into the Cave Lounge, there are a lot of not lakes, but streams that run in the Mammoth Cave with fish in them. So we built a huge fish pond at the entrance of the cave and put a huge bridge into it that you had to cross the bridge and the water with fish in it to get to the lounge.
What kind of place was the lounge?
What kind?
Well, how would you describe the lounge?
It was quite unique. It was dark and intimate-like. We had small individual tables. We had a huge round horseshoe bar. We had a stage for the bands to play. And when we started, we had entertainment from out of town, big bands that would come in to perform. And we did have some of our local bands. We had Heinz Causey. He had a band at the time, and he performed down there. There was also a group from Thomaston, Georgia, that would come in, and that way it gave us a variety of different bands, not the same band every week or every day.
So was it jazz music, or was it?
It was mostly just dance music.
Just dance music.
Yes, not jazz music.
Because a lot of people, are under the misnomer in Macon when they hear the name about the Cave Lounge as it being a strip club.
Mm-hmm. At one time we did have those.
Yeah. And was that early on or after?
That was mainly afterwards. We had the bands and everything at first, and then we had the traveling burlesque girls, or whatever you want to call them, that would come in. And there were a lot of there was one in particular, and I cannot recall her name. Her sister was a famous actress, and she brought her own band. And she was very, very intelligent, very smart lady. I mean, real smart. And all of her money that she made, she invested in land in Orlando before Disney World started. She was buying land by the thousands of acres around Orlando. And that's what she did with her money. So they were not just dummies that would come and work for us. Some of them were very, very intelligent.
So you had the burlesque dancers. How were they received in Macon at that
time?
Very well. Very well.
And we maintained strictness that you had, if you came in, you had to act appropriately. You couldn't get out of hand, be lewd or rude or crude with any of our employees or the people that worked in the band or the girls that worked. We maintained that. We were fortunate that we operated a nice place, so people acted nice.
Right.
We didn't have to have guards or police officers to be there to patrol. Never had one. Never.
Boy, today you'd have to have security out the nose.
Yeah. I mean,
Today's a different
it was
story.
just a different place, and Macon had never had anything like that.
No, they haven't. You pioneered something they have never had.
To mention one of the places, Lindbergh's was in Macon. And Lindbergh's was a very nice restaurant, and they had very good food, but they were different from the Saratoga and the Cellar. I don't think you could go in there and get an alcohol.
Right.
That you could get a beer, I think, but that was about it. And you could get good food. And at the time when we opened the Saratoga and the Cellar, like I said, it was against the law to have liquor by the drink. So the city came up with a wine pouring license, which entitled us to sell liquor by the drink. And we would pay, I think it's $1,500 a year for the license.
You made that the first week.
And we had the people that owned Capricorn, Bill Walden, Frank Pinter, Ted Centers, they ate with us all the time. And when Dwayne Allman died, the other band member that died about a year later, Barry Oakley, almost a year later, almost in the same exact space, I think, that he died in, they came down and had a private dining room and celebrated their lives. All the band members and all of them came down one night and celebrated, had dinner and drinks at the restaurant.
How big was the cellar and then the lounge, being they were separate? How big were these?
Saratoga, the cellar's seated about probably around 150, 175 people, and the cave would be 150, 175 people. Mark's cellar, the Saratoga, was maybe a little bit less in size because of the way the building was designed.
Well, even though the building was tore down, the basement area would have probably still there, I would imagine.
It probably is. I'm not sure what they did.
Because I know that this arched way from the Fickling building next door, which would have been the Georgia Power building probably then, to next door has been blocked off.
Yeah, we had some of our customers that we had were world famous actresses. Bob Hope came down to rechristen or reopen the Grand Theater, grand reopening, and they had Bob Hope because a long time ago he performed there, and so they had him come back to do a grand reopening of the Grand. And then they went over to the Hilton Hotel, which was new at the time, and Bob and all of his entourage, they had a police escort, and they walked over to the hotel and stayed, shook hands with Vince, and then they came down to the Cave Lounge and danced, and stayed till we closed up. We had a special agreement with the Cincinnati Reds Ball Club. Any night that they played baseball, because those boys made nothing, they made no money at all. That most of them lived in the YMCA or got together and rented rooms and apartments. We stayed open 30 minutes extra every night that they played in town. The ball players would come to eat with us at the Saratoga at the time. And Pete Rose, Tommy Helms, Art Shansky, Lee May, all of those used to come and sit, and we'd sit and talk to them. And when Pete made the big leagues, his first year, I don't know if people know this, but the big leagues used to all of them would spring practice in Florida. On the way back north, they would ride the train. The train would stop at the terminal, and they would have some time to go spend visiting around Macon or whatever. And Pete Rose walked into the Saratoga that day. He was just his first year with the big leagues. He walked into the restaurant, and I was talking to Pete, and I said, Pete, all the girls flocked all over Pete Rose, and he had a beautiful little Corvette. And I said, Pete, you still got your Corvette? He said, no, I'm big time now, man. I bought me a Pontiac Bonneville. but it made me feel good to have felt that he felt special enough. And then anytime they knocked a home run, we gave them a free steak. Any of the Cincinnati Red ball players got a free steak if they knocked a home run.
That's
So
amazing.
they love to come to the Saratoga.
Well, you know, taking it back, you mentioned earlier that you can remember visiting the Pig and Whistle in the 40s
In the 40s and 50s.
and the 50s. Tell me about the Pig in those days.
It was always full. The Pig Special, you couldn't find a sandwich like anywhere near Macon. It was out of sight. And all of us boys, 16, 17, 18 years old, we loved to hang out at the Pig. And what we do, of course, we're always chasing girls at that time. So we would constantly drive between the alley off of Hardeman Avenue by Rackley's Animal Hospital over to the side, tour through the varsity to see if we could see any girls. We couldn't. We'd come back over to the Pig and just park and have a soda or a sandwich or something like that. And the Kerr boys, which were real famous at that time, would come over and we'd get them to do the ham bone for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd always tip them for doing that. So it was, the Pig had, even though they were basically owned by the same as Kingman at the time, they were a little bit different in a different way. The varsity had a big dining room built into it that you could go in and sit down and eat at tables. And the Pig had a small place that not many of us ever went in. We stayed outside in the cars. And you could always find your friends. If you ever wanted to find your friends, you went to the Pig or the varsity.
Yeah, it's amazing. People always bring up the food and the friends.
Mm-hmm.
The two things that they always talk about.
Anytime we wanted to find our friends, we went to the Pig or the varsity. Mainly my group, we went to the Pig.
Yeah.
And it was always packed.
You know, I asked Sheriff Davis earlier, do you think people didn't realize the famous personalities that were coming out of the Pig? Because in the early 40s, you had Tennessee Williams that worked at the Pig,
Mm-hmm.
wrote Cat on a Hot Tin Roof right down here on Georgia Avenue,
Right down there.
based Cat on a Hot Tin Roof on Macon, Georgia, which Macon still doesn't realize to this day.
Yeah.
They have no idea it's about them. It's about Big Daddy that lived here.
Mm-hmm.
You had Little Richard.
Little
You had
Richard.
Otis
Mhm.
Redding.
Mm-hmm.
You had Blind Willie McTell coming from Atlanta to Macon. You had James Brown periodically. But he was, you know, Sheriff Davis mentioned that, I think the way he worded it, people didn't realize who those people were going to be.
We didn't have the idea at the time.
You know, that it was growing, but there were always famous people coming through this parking lot with pictures of Cher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned the Allman Brothers earlier, to James Arness, who played Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, was stationed here in the 40s out
And
of
his
Camp Wheeler.
daughter, Jim Arnett,
Yep.
with Gunsmoke.
Yep.
His daughter was here in town with Greg Allman for a while, and they used to come in the restaurant. I went to school with Phil Walden, so I knew Phil real good. And Greg would come in with, and I don't know what the young lady's name is, but they would come in to eat. And I remember coming in the cellar one day to eat, and they sat down and ate their meal and had no money. Greg didn't keep any money with him at the time. And I called Frank and I said, Frank, I said, Greg Allman just came in and ate lunch and didn't have any money. What do you want me to do? He said, just send me the bill. Anytime he comes in there and eat, just send me the bill and I'll pay you. So that's what we would do with Greg Allman. But we fed Ellie Mae from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
Was standing at our place. Penny with Sky King. The old program used to be mainly on the radio. Rosemary Guy with the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Mm-hmm.
She was down at our restaurant eating. And Raymond Burr on Perry Mason,
Mm-hmm.
we fed him. And like I say, Bob Hope, Jimmy Carter used to come eat with us. Herman Talmadge, who was governor of Georgia and senator, used to come eat with us. And Sam Nunn, when he was in high school and then probably in college, used to bring his date. And he would come down, and he became one of the famous senators in Washington. and a lot of nice people. One of the people that played baseball, Johnny Vanderveer, who I think is the only one that ever pitched two no-hitters in the same World Series. Mm-hmm. He came in today. Wally Butts, head coach at the University of Georgia, came in and got to talk to him one time, came in by himself one night and got to speak with him. But we had all kind of people passing through Macon at the time, and there was no place for them to go at the time except Mark Sullivan, Saratoga.
Unless you wanted to go to a drive-in. There was no sit-down, nice restaurants.
And then they had the Bell House, which was down across the old Sears building on 3rd Street. And then you had Arctic Circle, you had the Polar Bear. They were drive-in restaurants. And a lot of places in Macon that people today have no idea.
Yeah, Macon was a hub of cell phone restaurants, not franchises.
Yeah, they were independently owned, local people, and you knew the owners. And Kegg's Restaurant, I don't know if y'all ever heard of it.
I see some of the old postcards.
Mr. Kegg, his name was Kegliostro, and he was the manager of the Elks Club. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Frank Vineyard, who owned the Seagram's liquor distributorship here in Macon, wanted to open a restaurant. And so he talked Kegg into leaving the Elks Club and going out, and I'm sure as be a partner with him in Kegg's Restaurant, mm-hmm. which was out towards Wesleyan College. And it was one of the finest restaurants also that ever came to Macon. And when you walked in the door, people like to see the owners. When they come into a place, they want to see the person that owns it. Now, there are a few restaurants downtown, but most of your restaurants for franchises, mm-hmm. and they're from all over the country, and you never see the owner. You see the manager that's there. But back when we were in the business, in Kegg, people wanted to be able to talk to the owner. And you'd walk in the door at Kegg's. Kegg's was a fine restaurant person, fine. And he would be standing there with his tuxedo on to greet you and walk around the tables and speak to you. And he would come up with items in the kitchen that weren't on the menu that he wanted you to sample. And he would bring you a little plate of that sampling to let you try. And then if you liked it or whatever, eventually he would probably stick it on the menu. But Kegg was a fine restaurant person too. So people don't realize about a lot of these fine restaurants that Macon had.
Yeah, that's true. There were so many of them. Have you thought about going back in the restaurant business?
No, thank you. I've had many people over the years ask me, but the restaurant business was fine. If you like people, it's great. The gentleman that bought the Saratoga from us, nice person, but he was not a people person. And I think he only was there for about a year. And people just like to be able to come in and see you and greet you, talk to you, to be treated like a real person, whereas you don't see that today, except 2 or 3 of the restaurants downtown.
Yeah, you see very few of that. That's the reason in our research and marketing, of course, they want us to rebuild the pig. Mm-hmm. They want a pig back in Macon. They want one back in Atlanta. And I ask everybody, how would it go over? Del Ward sat there in that spot 2 weeks ago and said that, it'd go over well. But would it go over well?
I think it would. Look at the varsity in Atlanta. It's still there. Mm-hmm. And it's got one of the finest names, the varsity in Athens. I have a friend of mine that he and his wife live in Macon, and they constantly drive over to the varsity in Athens just to eat lunch. Yeah. So people from
I reckon it would be a destination mm-hmm. spot, a landmark destination mm-hmm. spot.
I think it would go over great because I don't think there's one in Macon now.
No, there's none. There's nothing like that in Macon now.
Nothing.
And they closed in we closed in 78, but we are looking for property.
Yeah. So see, you'd have to go now to a drive-in restaurant, like your McDonald's and Burger Kings and places like that, and they're totally different from the Pig and the Varsity.
I would have to do a dine-in, drive-in. I would want to dine-in, drive-in. But you know what? The further we go along with this project, being that you've got a lot of experience, I may pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, how would you do this? How would you do that? I might see, he's the one that's got the experience and the knowledge, and she's been around. These are the kind of people I would call for advice on how would you do this. If you were going to put the Pig and Bacon today, where would you put it?
Possibly somewhere not way out, but maybe the Riverside area, the Bible area, somewhere out that way where you get a lot of traffic, a lot of people. It'd be easy to get to. There's certain locations that restaurants do good in, and there's certain restaurant areas that I think they don't do too good in.
Everybody wants us back downtown so far.
If there's a location down there, it would go over good because you've got so many people living downtown now.
There's just not. Mercer would be, close to that area would be great. There's just not enough. There's no land.
Yeah, one of the differences in our lounge that we had and restaurants was we would not allow anyone under 21 to set foot in the building. We had 4 young people that were probably 17, 18, 19 maybe, came into our lounge one night to dance with a fake ID, and that's when they were the old-timey driver's license. And the waitress walked over to me and she said, Mr. Gandy, I think you need to come over here and check this table out because I don't think they need to be in here. I walked over and he had rubbed it so many times that he had almost scratched a hole in it to put a different date. And I said, y'all can't stay in here because if the law comes in, they order to drink with that fake ID because the waitress couldn't refuse them with the fake ID. But when she saw that they were so young, she called me, and I immediately went over, and they already had the drinks on the table, and I said, I hate to tell you, but y'all can't stay. I'm not going to jail just to sell you a drink and make money. So we were real strict. You could not come in if you were under 21 where we served alcohol.
Yeah.
Now, you could go into the restaurant, but the lounge was separated from the restaurant at that point. Now, where they have music, you can go in there at 15, 16, I think. But we wouldn't let you in the door.
I think the Cellar and the Cave would do good today in Macon.
Yeah.
Probably would.
But, ask him about his mother's.
Oh, yeah, my mother, bless her heart, she came off the farm. The farm. She never cooked anything with a recipe. And that lady could cook up a blue spoon. She and my brother Philip were the managers of the kitchen. And my dad and I ran the front. And she whipped up a recipe called cheese dip. And we still, to this day, have people calling me constantly wanting the recipe for her cheese dip. Every time you sat down at the table at lunch, you had a bowl of pickles. Our pickles came in a 50-gallon barrel, wooden barrel, that we got out of Seashore Pickle Company, out of a company down there in Miami, and we had it shipped into Macon. And it got to where we're using so many pickles, we ran out of space in a walk-in cooler. So we'd store it down at Swift and Company, and we'd go get our meat, we'd get pickles. We found out the employees like pickles.
They're all disappearing.
So we get down in the pickles, we'd be gone. Yeah. So we had to figure something out, but you would dip those pickles in that cheese dip. It was a special recipe my mother came up with. And I had a couple from Jacksonville, Florida that happened to come through, and they stopped at the restaurant and ate and tried some of the pickles and dip. And I got a call long distance one day from Jacksonville, Florida. This lady said, "You do not know me, but my husband owns a bag company in Jacksonville, and the Georgia-Florida football game is about to come up, and we're going to have a big party, and I need some of your pickle and cheese dip for my party. I want 2 gallons of dip and 2 gallons of pickles." And I said, "Ma'am, how am I going to get that to you? I don't care how you get it to me, you get it to me." So I did some research and found out it was a bus going straight through from Macon to Jacksonville, Florida. And they were notified, what time the bus was going to get there. And I put it in the freezer. That didn't freeze it because that was not good. But I got it as cold as I could. I packed it and wrapped it real good and shipped that cheese dip to that lady in Jacksonville, Florida. That's how bad she wanted it. And of course I got my check.
People contact you all the time for the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
What do you tell them?
Oh, we'll give it to them. Yeah, we shouldn't, but we do. We should have branded it and put a.
Well, there is still maybe a possibility to do that. But we're in the manufacturing business. That's what the pig does now.
Yeah, you should.
We manufacture now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've got some surprises for you.
Really, we do. We have people constantly calling us like that.
Well, I tell you what, for your generosity in doing what you did here today, I want to see, what did you call it? Just pickles and dip?
Cheese dip and pickles. They weren't just dill pickles. They were kosher dill pickles. And it was like I call it a rain barrel. It was a big 50-gallon barrel, wooden, with a wooden top. And we had to break the top. And when you stood there, when you broke that top, you could like you open a beer or something, you get that, and the fermentation and all the stuff
that was wonderful.
That was down in there. You couldn't find a pickle like that. I mean, it was just out of this world, and that dip was very, very good.
So how hard is it to make that dip?
Very easy. People call, when I tell them what the recipe is, I've got it written down. I say, now, we made it in big bats. So you're going to be making it at home, and you've got to realize that the ingredients we use, you've got to use your taste buds to work on it to get it to what we had. Because we did it in huge bats, like a big mix bass thing. And we give them the ingredients, but
nobody's marketed that yet.
I was about to say, part of it would be marketing what you just
That's
mentioned.
what we should have done, is we should have gotten a patent on it.
Yeah, you should still do that. You should market
So
it.
this was just at the Cellar. Was it at
Both of them. Mark Cellar and the Cellar. Mark Cellar, the Saratoga and the Cellar.
But what you would be branding is the fact that you mentioned the sound coming from the pickles and the memory of your mom. That's what you'd be selling.
She made,
in other words.
we made our own. Desserts were all handmade. They were not bought. Yeah. And I'll tell you how, when we first opened the Saratoga was first, like say 1957, our kitchen, we were just expanding as we went along. We started off small, we'd expand. All of our pies were homemade by my mother, handmade. We didn't have the room at the restaurant at Saratoga. My mother made all the pies at her house, and we would transport them down to the the Saratoga at the time. Lemon pie and lemon meringue pie and chocolate meringue pie.
My dad used to talk about the lemon pie. He said, "I swear to God, I'd go in there and tell him to give me a pie and a spoon."
And what I think about now, it makes me sick when I go in a restaurant and you look at the dessert menu.
Yeah.
We sold our homemade lemon pie for 25 cents a slice.
I envision things like this, for example, with Gandy's homemade recipes, where you really you would be the marketing person for that because you'd be talking about it.
Well, he's got the voice to go.
Yeah, you would be talking about it to the public.
We'd sell a pie, the whole pie, for what you pay now for a slice in a lot of your restaurants.
Right.
And a lot of them now aren't homemade. But my mother, we'd take 18 to 22 pound prime ribs, and it'd have a big jacket on it. We'd cut up the jacket down to the meat, and we'd pull that jacket back which would be the fat.
Mm-hmm.
And we would line that thing with all kind of seasoning and stuff. And then we'd cook that prime rib on slow all day long. All day long. And then you would get that good au jus in the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course your end's always the more done. And as you get to the middle, that's where you get your
Right.
rare. And people just loved our prime rib.
Well, I tell you, if we do rebuild the pig, we're going to hire you for part of the menu. We've got part of the menu, but we'd like to hire you for part of the menu and introduce to the public some of those recipes again in honor of you and your family, your mom. Let me back up for a second. Tell me about the Kingmans and the Kingman family, because a lot of people don't realize their association with Pig and Whistle in Georgia, period. Not just Macon, but they had a lot to do with the one in Atlanta, along with Mr. Bryant. What do you remember about the Kingmans? I know you were friends with Brother.
Brother Kingmans was my best friend. If you saw one of us, you saw both of us.
What happened to Brother Kingman?
He moved to North Carolina. He married and moved to North Carolina and went into the Christmas tree business.
Yep.
I think there was some other stuff.
That's what
involved.
Billy Hicks told me.
He went into the Christmas tree business, and he died. Brother died at a young age, what I would call a young age. I think he had cancer or something. But Brother was just a fine friend.
Did you stay in contact with him throughout the years?
Some I did, because you had separated, so to speak, but we lived together. And they were good Catholics. And Brother was an altar boy at the Catholic Church, St. Joseph's Catholic
And
Church.
I think Carl Kane, Billy Hicks told me Carl Kane was a Catholic as well too, but related to the Kingmans.
Yeah. Brother was not allowed to eat meat on Friday. And when I'd go to spend the night with the Kingmans, with many, many nights on Friday night, we'd have a sandwich, an egg sandwich, an olive sandwich, anything but meat. And we would walk or ride our bicycles downtown to the movie theaters. And we'd always go to the late show. And then we'd get out, it'd be late, and we'd kill time till around 12 o'clock. And then we'd go get us a hot dog. Because he could eat meat after 12.
After 12. Then ride the bicycles back over.
Yeah. But we just had so many good times that we had together.
What was his father? What was Bob Kingman like?
He was a fine gentleman, and his mother, very, very kind. Good Southern people, good manners, very hospitable to us young kids. We were always welcome in their home. Always welcome in their home.
Did they ever mention to you where they got the idea of bringing the Pig and Whistle to Macon?
No, I never heard them say that. I really didn't. After all that time spending with them,
Well, when you're young, it's not that important.
we didn't think about that. It's mostly girls and cars at the time. And since in the Kingman house, it was such a big residence, in the pool table and the pinball machines, us little boys, we just loved because we could go into billiard halls at the time. The only one we could go into was Kennedy's Pool Hall, which was over on Holt Avenue, on the Bible, and that would be where we would pass by going to Lanier High School.
I think the one downtown was known for hot dogs and orange soda.
We, at the pool room, the Sarah, the Macon Billiard Academy and the New Arcade, we had a kitchen downstairs.
Right.
And when I was 12 or 13 years old, my daddy put me to work when I was 12 or 13. He said there are no free lunches. If you want something, you're going to work for it. He put me to work in his pool room. On Saturdays, I washed beer mugs, swept the floors, and cleaned the bathrooms. That was my job. Monday through, this was after summertime. On Monday through Friday, I worked in the kitchen downstairs. Hamburger buns and hot dog buns were not sliced. So they bought a machine, and I would open up all the packages and adjust the blade, the hamburger to slice the whole bun, hot dog just to slice the top of it. And then I would have to repackage them. We couldn't buy French fries already made up.
Right.
So they put a machine on the wall. I would clean the skin off the potatoes. I would wash them and rinse them. I would put them on that gadget on the machine up on the wall and pull the lever, and it would push the potato down through into the water. I would wash them, rinse them, and then bag them up and put them in the freezer. And that's how we got our French fries. Was that one?
Really, at a young age, he was inspired to be in the restaurant business. I mean, this goes, you started just young.
One thing, my daddy, like I say, insisted that we work. There was no,
right.
He wasn't going to give us free money, which I appreciate today. I'm 81 years old and I'm still working. I work part-time. And I just appreciate what he did for me by teaching me the principles of money, that it doesn't grow on a tree and you have to work for what you get. And today a lot of kids don't work. I put my kids to work when they were 15. My two daughters, they worked in gift shops, trinket shops, clothing shops. My sons went into the lawn business, and they worked. And my two sons cut grass, weed eated, and stuff like that. But they made their own money, which I think is a good way to train people.
Well, we're going to stay in touch with you about pickles and dip.
Okay.
Because we've got a few surprises for you to take home with you today.
Oh, okay.
And to show you what we do, what the Pig and Whistle does now.
Well, it's a real pleasure to meet you, because I didn't know that. I just always thought Mr. Kingman was the only owner ever, of the Pig and Whistle Varsity.
Now, the cheese dip and pickles, was the pickle served whole, or was it served sliced?
Sliced.
Long ways, or just individual?
Across, round
slices of pickle, and then served with the dip. That is a
Our
combination.
waitresses cut them fresh every morning. Every morning.
Is that pickle company still in business? That's probably part of it.
I don't know if they are or not. I really don't. But because it's been so long ago since we ordered them. But I will tell you what, they were delicious kosher dill pickles.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've motivated us a lot today. First, by coming.
Yeah. Well, one thing about being in the restaurant business, you need to like people. You need to be a people person, because that way you get along with people, no matter who they are, where they came from, what their age is, their standard of living.
Right.
You treat them all the same. And you respect them. And the customer's always right, even if he's wrong.
That's where you come in.
That's the marketing part of it.
That's where you come in.
But I loved people.
Oh.
The hours, my average work week was 80 to 90 hours a week in the restaurant business.
That's hard work.
And you have a family, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
To have a family with kids, because you want to participate in the ball games and the ballets and stuff like that. So you got to really struggle to find the time to do that.
Do you miss being in the restaurant business?
I miss the people. The hours I don't miss, but I do. We had on Thursdays we had a special at the Saratoga, and people laugh at me when I tell them, you got the special for Thursday was a big bowl of black-eyed peas with crackling bread, stricoline, Greek peppers, and coleslaw for 75 cents. And we had, at the time, everything was downtown. People weren't out in the suburbs working. Everybody worked downtown. And a lot of the architects would eat with us all during the week. But on Thursdays, a lot of them from all the different architectural firms, they were just good friends, not competitors, but good friends. They would all come, and I knew about 11:30, I set a table up every Thursday for them, 10 to 12 people, and they would sit, and I always called them my black-eyed pea boy day.
Did you come up with that?
I don't know
Formula
where it
or your
came
mom?
from, but we had a special every day with the black-eyed peas, and we'd have a lot of people from the north that would go, what is stricoline? They'd never heard of stricoline.
Mr. Dunwoody was here 2 weeks ago.
Huh?
Mr. Dunwoody, the architectural firm down.
He ate with us all the time.
Yeah, he was here
All
2
the
weeks ago.
time.
Well, he talked about you a couple of
Did
weeks
he?
ago.
Yeah, they were good friends, those architects from
Yeah.
all different firms, and they were such good friends. And I didn't ever look at my customers. I don't like customers. I like friends. So I tried to make them all friends. And when I had a chance, I would try and sit with them and talk to them and, have a cup of coffee or something like that. And just you get to know them. And a lot of them, we did other things outside of working together.
Again, if we get the pig rebuilt
I
in Macon,
miss old Macon.
he's the kind of person I want to visit at least 2 or 3 times a week, if you don't mind. I think we need a personality like you
Yes.
to come in that door sometimes and just lighten people
Yeah,
up.
my brother, bless his heart, Philip,
Mhm.
his wife passed away 2 years ago with lung cancer.
Mm.
They were living in Florida. She was our bookkeeper, and Philip and my mother were the kitchen managers. My brother, he loves cooking. He loves it. Even when he was married, he probably cooked 75% of their meals at home, and he just loves to cook. But Philip and I had, relatives had different personalities.
Yeah.
He was quiet. I was always talkative. Once he got to talking to you, it was okay. But he'd rather cook or play his musical instruments. He loved guitars. And I'd rather talk to him.
Well, you said at the Cellar and at the Cave, you had the Phil Walden's group, the Capricorn recording people coming in
All
often.
the time.
Dwayne Allman. What do you remember about Dwayne Allman?
I don't really remember other than they would come in occasionally. The whole band would come in. They would mainly go over to the Cave and listen to the music, stuff like that. And they were a great band, but their music was really different from what
The other people.
the people that we had that come to dance, But they were a great band, known all over the world.
Oh yeah, still are. They're more famous today than what they were then.
I know it, yeah. But it's just a shame that they passed away, and time flies when we get old.
Yeah.
Lives change.
Well, I ran into a 21-year-old girl the other day in a grocery store when I was checking out, and she says, "Have you noticed how time's flying by so fast?" And she's 21 years of age.
Yeah, well,
So it's flying by for all of us.
People's my habit.
Well, that's a wonderful thing.
My hobby is people.
What is your part-time work now, if I can ask?
I work for 5-Star Dodge.
Okay.
I drive cars. I'm a fleet driver for them. I just could not. I've never sat home. Like I said, my daddy put me to work about 12 or 13, and I not had a job. I was in sales for Burns Brick Company for 32 years. I traveled 3 states, calling on architects, engineers, and our distributor network that we had set up. I worked in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And when I retired, I had to have something to do.
That's true.
So a good friend of mine, he's over all the 5-star companies, and he's a good making boy. And I called him one day and I said, "Can I come talk to you?" He said, "Yeah, come on down." I said, "Bobby, I need something to do." He said, "I need a driver." I said, "Okay, here I am." So I've been driving now for 6 years, so I've never not had a job.
nice.
Keeps you in contact with the world.
I had plenty for him to do, but he didn't like
He didn't like the honeydew list?
He didn't like that. Yes.
But tell me about how long you two have been married and where you met at.
You want to get on the camera?
No, she won't. She told me no
So,
camera.
okay.
We've been married 21 years, and we met
At church.
totally by mistake. I had ordered some fertilizer from our
yeah.
men's club at Forest Hill Methodist Church, ordered some fertilizer from another friend of mine, and he delivered it. So we met by him delivering fertilizer to my house.
So I see I'm still a people person.
Yeah, that worked out real good for you.
And so we just we were both single at the time and got involved with the single ministry at the church, and so we just started dating and we were married for 20 years.
Originally from Macon?
I was born in Atlanta, but had been here all but 5 years of my life.
So you hung out at the Pig and Whistle as well, too?
Pig and Whistle,
Varsity.
Varsity. I actually went to I used to work at Belt Matthews downtown when I was 16. I was a switchboard operator at Belt Matthews, and I used to go on lunchtime over to the Saratoga and eat the hamburgers. The hamburgers were my favorite. The hamburgers.
A good old charcoal burger.
Wow.
And of course, didn't have any idea who he was. So, but and then I have been down to the Mark Cellar in the cave and before I knew him.
Yeah.
So
That's nice. That's really nice.
Well, I've asked a few women around town. I've showed them these pictures. I asked them, was this you? Was this you? You should see some of the facial expressions. And I said, did you pose for this picture back then? I had one tell me yesterday, she says, where am I going to get a martini glass that size?
people know, Marcus, we're big dancers, and everywhere we go to dance, there's always somebody there that recognizes him. He may not always remember who they are,
But
they will
remember
ask
you.
him, are you the one that owned the Saratoga, the Mark Cellar, or whatever? And, they always speak to him, yes.
That's really nice.
Well, I've still got to find this B. Morrison, who painted these pictures. I think that, this person may have passed away, but I wanted to include a little bit of that on this biography.
You see, I can't place who he is. Tom Stewart, we had murals at the Saratoga.
Yeah.
Tom Stewart, who was a local boy and a great football player, did all the murals at the Saratoga. I know that personally. But I'm not sure who did the ones over at the cave. We had those in the cellar